The slave is not created through violence. He is created through rhythm, through repetition, through small, seemingly harmless concessions that slowly rearrange the internal hierarchy of command. Lust is not a sudden collapse of morals or a dramatic fall from grace. It is a quiet education. It teaches the body before it ever convinces the mind. It trains the nervous system to seek, to wait, to anticipate, to ache, and finally to comply. Over time, the man does not notice that his days have begun to organize themselves around desire. His energy rises and falls based on access to stimulation. His mood is dictated by proximity to relief. His attention, once a weapon, becomes a leash. He is no longer acting upon the world, he is responding to it. This is how obedience is installed without resistance. It feels self-directed. Lust works because it does not command through force, but through promise. It never says kneel, it says almost. Almost satisfied, almost fulfilled, almost complete. And in that almost, the man learns to hover in a state of perpetual wanting. Wanting keeps him compliant. Wanting keeps him busy. Wanting keeps him from asking dangerous questions about his direction, his discipline, and his wasted potential. Each cycle reinforces the lesson. Discomfort must be eliminated immediately. Tension must be resolved now. Stillness is intolerable. Silence is threatening. The man becomes allergic to internal pressure, and in doing so, he forfeits the very capacity that produces strength. A man who cannot hold pressure cannot generate force. He can only seek release. This is decadence in its purest, most functional sense. Not moral rot, but the decay of will. Friedrich Nietzsche described decadence as the moment when instinct turns against life, when vital forces no longer serve growth, creation, or self-overcoming, but are redirected towards self-soothing and escape. Lust accomplishes this inversion flawlessly. Sexual energy, arguably the most potent fuel a man possesses, is stripped of direction and reduced to consumption. Instead of building, it dissipates. Instead of sharpening, it dulls. The man still feels alive, but his movement has no trajectory. He mistakes sensation for vitality, arousal for power, relief for peace. He is expending enormous energy and going nowhere. As this pattern deepens, the external master becomes unnecessary. The most effective form of control is internalized. Desire issues the orders now. A glance, a thought, an image flashes across the mind, and the body responds instantly. The spine leans forward, the breath changes, focus fractures. This is not coincidence, it is conditioning. The man has been trained to obey signals, and because the signals originate inside him, he mistakes obedience for choice. He says, "I want this," without realizing that wanting itself has been programmed. The slave believes he is free because no one is holding the chain, unaware that the chain has been grafted onto his nervous system. This is where the deepest humiliation occurs, not externally, but internally. The man begins to negotiate with himself like a subordinate seeking permission. Just one more time. I'll start tomorrow. This doesn't really affect me. These are not rational thoughts. They are appeasement language. They mirror the psychology of submission. He bargains with desire instead of commanding it. He placates impulse instead of ordering it. Over time, this negotiation erodes self-respect, not because of guilt, but because the body remembers who is in charge. And when a man repeatedly chooses relief over direction, his body learns that his word carries no weight. Authority collapses inward first. Lust also fractures time perception. The future loses gravity. Long-term aims feel distant, abstract, unreal. The present moment becomes tyrannical. Everything must be felt now, resolved now, consumed now. This is how men become manageable. A man anchored in the future is dangerous. He can endure discomfort, delay gratification, and resist manipulation. A man trapped in the present is easy to steer. Give him stimulation and he will forget his mission. Give him novelty, and he will surrender momentum. Lust does not merely distract, it shortens the man's horizon. He becomes a creature of moments instead of a builder of outcomes. And because this obedience is pleasurable, it is defended with aggression. Any suggestion of restraint is framed as repression. Any discipline is mocked as insecurity. Any man who refuses the loop is labeled rigid, bitter, or afraid. This is not confidence speaking, it is conditioning protecting itself. The slave resents restraint because restraint exposes possibility. The disciplined man stands as living evidence that desire does not have to rule. And that realization is unbearable to the obedient, because it reveals that the chains were never locked, only accepted. Once obedience has been installed at the level of instinct, values must be rewritten to protect it. No system of control survives without moral justification, and lust is no exception. What begins as behavior slowly hardens into belief. The man no longer merely indulges, he defends. He reframes his obedience as philosophy, his weakness as worldview, his lack of command as authenticity. This is where lust graduates from habit into morality. The slave does not say, "I cannot resist." He says, "There is nothing to resist." And in that statement, the inversion is complete. Friedrich Nietzsche understood this mechanism precisely. Slave morality is not created by the strong. It is created by those who lack strength and must therefore redefine virtue in ways that flatter their limitations. What cannot be achieved is condemned. What requires discipline is labeled unnatural. What demands sacrifice is reframed as oppression. In this moral universe, restraint becomes pathology, ambition becomes arrogance, and self-mastery becomes insecurity. Pleasure, meanwhile, is elevated, not because it is noble, but because it is available. The slave does not worship pleasure because it is good. He worships it because it asks nothing of him. This is why indulgence is always accompanied by moral noise. Life is short. You only live once. At least I'm enjoying myself. These are not statements of wisdom. They are alibis. They exist to anesthetize the awareness that something higher has been abandoned. Pleasure becomes the moral shield behind which stagnation hides. Failure is softened by sensation. Dissatisfaction is numbed instead of confronted. The man learns to soothe the discomfort of unrealized potential rather than answer it. He trades trajectory for relief and calls the trade-off balance. Over time, this morality reshapes identity. The man begins to see himself not as a builder, but as a consumer of experiences. Life is no longer something to be forged, it is something to be tasted. He becomes obsessed with feeling states, excited, aroused, entertained, validated, while his capacity to endure boredom, solitude, and friction atrophies. Yet these very states, boredom, solitude, pressure, are where vision is formed. Slave morality teaches men to avoid the inner silence where uncomfortable truths emerge. Noise is safety. Stimulation is shelter. Stillness is dangerous because it exposes the gap between who the man is and who he could have been. This is also where resentment enters. The man ruled by lust cannot help but resent the man ruled by mission. Discipline is an accusation simply by existing. A man who can delay gratification reveals that delay is possible. A man who does not chase exposes the cost of chasing. Rather than confront this, the slave moralist attacks the ideal. He mocks ambition as obsession. He frames discipline as repression. He insists that restraint is fear in disguise. These attacks are not aimed outward, they are aimed inward, projected onto others. The slave must believe that the sovereign is secretly miserable because the alternative, that sovereignty is attainable, would demand change. Lust also feminizes the will, not in relation to women, but in relation to passivity. The will becomes receptive rather than directive. The man waits to be stimulated instead of generating force. He scrolls instead of builds. He consumes images of power instead of cultivating it internally. His imagination is filled with fantasies of dominance. while his real-world posture grows increasingly compliant. This split creates quiet self-contempt. He feels powerful in his mind and weak in his actions, and slave morality steps in to reconcile the contradiction. Action is overrated. Everything is relative. Control is an illusion. These beliefs are not discoveries, they are defenses. Eventually, pleasure becomes not just acceptable but virtuous. To deny oneself is framed as cruelty. To endure is framed as unnecessary suffering. The language of comfort infiltrates ethics. Any system, belief, or discipline that demands sacrifice is dismissed as outdated or extreme. This is how entire cultures drift towards softness without ever declaring it. The moral vocabulary changes first. Words like discipline, order, and hierarchy become suspicious, while words like expression, freedom, and desire are left deliberately vague. Vagueness is useful. It allows obedience to masquerade as individuality. The end result is a man who believes he is living fully while avoiding the very conditions that produce depth. He has pleasures but no gravity, options but no direction, sensations but no structure. Slave morality convinces him that this is liberation. In reality, it is managed existence. A life optimized for comfort is easy to steer, easy to pacify, and easy to replace. And the man, anesthetized by pleasure and protected by belief, never realizes that his values were never chosen. They were adopted to justify his obedience. Freedom does not arrive when desire disappears. It arrives when desire is put back in its proper place. The final deception of slavery is the belief that liberation means indulgence without restraint, when in reality it means order restored. The man who seeks to destroy lust only strengthens it, because suppression still grants it authority. The man who submits to lust is already defeated. Sovereignty emerges only when desire is subordinated to will, when instinct is no longer the ruler, but the resource. This is not morality, this is hierarchy. Friedrich Nietzsche never advocated the castration of instinct. He despised weakness disguised as virtue just as much as indulgence disguised as freedom. His higher man does not flee desire, he commands it. He understands that raw impulse is energy, and energy without direction is chaos. Lust becomes destructive only when it is allowed to issue orders. When reclaimed, it becomes fuel. Concentrated attention, aggression refined into purpose, intensity aimed instead of leaked. The sovereign man does not eliminate pressure, he contains it, and containment is where power is forged. The first act of breaking the chain is aim. Lust thrives in men with no clear direction because it offers instant purpose. Chase this, want that, respond now. A man without a future will always be ruled by the present. When a mission carries weight, when something meaningful stands ahead, desire loses its tyranny. Not because it vanishes, but because it is no longer the most compelling force in the room. The body obeys what the future demands. Vision collapses compulsion. A man building something real cannot afford to be endlessly available to impulse. Next comes resistance, not repression, but voluntary refusal. This is where authority is rebuilt internally. Each time a man chooses not to obey an urge, the nervous system relearns hierarchy. The body discovers that discomfort is survivable. That tension can be held without collapse. That relief does not need to be immediate. This is how the will regains credibility. A man's word begins to matter again, to himself first. Discipline is not about denial. It is about restoring trust between command and action. Without that trust, confidence is performative and fragile. As resistance strengthens, time perception changes. The present moment loosens its grip. The future regains gravity. The man no longer feels rushed by desire because he is anchored by direction. He moves slower, speaks less, and carries more weight in silence. His energy stops leaking outward in constant pursuit and begins to condense inward. This is why disciplined men feel different in a room. Not louder, denser. Their presence is not hungry. Hunger is submission. Their stillness communicates that they are not waiting for permission from sensation. Eventually, pleasure itself is transformed. It is no longer compulsive or guilt-ridden. It becomes deliberate, chosen, timed. The sovereign man indulges when it serves him, not when it interrupts him. Pleasure becomes a tool rather than a master. And because it is no longer forbidden or worshipped, it loses its hypnotic power. This is the paradox the slave never understands. Command dissolves obsession. What rules you must be constantly negotiated with. What serves you does not dominate your thoughts. The final shift is identity. The man no longer sees himself as someone trying to resist temptation, but as someone who decides. Decision replaces struggle. Authority replaces negotiation. He does not argue with desire. He places it where it belongs, below mission, below discipline, below self-respect. And in doing so, he becomes unpredictable again, dangerous again. A man who can delay gratification cannot be easily manipulated. A man who can hold tension cannot be easily controlled. A man who commands himself does not need rebellion to feel alive. This is the end of slavery, not through pleasure denied, but through power reclaimed. Lust no longer whispers orders. It waits. And the man, finally sovereign, decides if and when it will be heard. Thus remember, we are indeceptor. What if everything you chase is what's weakening you? What if pleasure isn't reward, but a trap? And what if desire itself was the enemy all along? Death of desire, the Stoic's path to cold clarity. This is not a guide. This is not self-help. This is war. Kill the need. Master the mind. The Crusaders Bundle. 4 ruthless lessons. 1 unbreakable code. For a limited time, claim all 4 Indeceptor audiobooks for the price of 3. Step inside the private archive of discipline, power, and psychological warfare, where lust is conquered, the mind is weaponized, and legacy is forged. Don't just listen. Arm yourself. Indeceptions.com